Hey there, amazing listeners. Welcome to Family, Business, and Beyond. I'm Deborah Kane, and if you're a mom trying to juggle everything from diaper changes to business meetings, or someone just looking for a bit of joy and inspiration, you've found your new favorite podcast. Here, we talk about everything from launching your dream business to finding joys in family chaos, all while having a few laughs along the way. Each episode is packed with real stories, practical tips, lots of science, and a sprinkle of the unexpected to keep you hooked from start to finish. Ready to transform your life and have some fun? Let's get started. Hey there, amazing listeners. Welcome to Family, Business, and Beyond. I'm Deborah Kane. And if you're a mom trying to juggle everything from diaper changes to business meetings, or someone just looking for a bit of joy and inspiration, you've found your new favorite podcast. Here, we talk about everything from launching your dream business to finding joys in family chaos, all while having a few laughs along the way. Each episode is packed with real stories, practical tips, lots of science, and a sprinkle of the unexpected to keep you hooked from start to finish. Ready to transform your life and have some fun? Let's get started. Our next guest is Yulia Rafailova. After a decade of academic coaching and consulting with over 1,000 families, Yulia realized that parents play a fundamental role in helping kids and teens with ADHD to cultivate crucial executive function skills. She founded MindFull Education in 2017 to teach individuals and families about executive functioning and how to design better systems for getting along and getting stuff done. Her coaching is focused on creating empowering learning experiences through collaboration, problem solving, and the practice of mindfulness. Having grown up with undiagnosed ADHD and an anxiety disorder, Yulia can relate deeply to the individuals she works with. And she also serves on the board of directors for her local chapter of children and families, children and adults with ADHD, where she facilitates weekly teen and adult support groups. Yulia, welcome.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I hope I didn't mess up your last name too much.
Nope, you did a great job.
Okay. So I am anxious to get started right away because I have so many questions and I couldn't stop. I couldn't help myself. I have so many questions for you. And I think most people are familiar with the term executive functioning, but I don't know that they really know what it means. During my prep, I did a little work and I found out some things that I didn't know either. So if you want to give us the quick rundown.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a technical term. And I think a lot of people have probably heard of it, but they probably think it really relates to just academics and using a calendar or having a checklist, being able to organize yourself and manage tasks. And that certainly is what executive function is. But there's a broader understanding of executive function. And I use it interchangeably with ADHD, because as an ADHD and an executive function coach, executive function are the skills that are impaired or delayed when we have ADHD or dyslexia or depression and anxiety. There's lots of things that impair our executive function. So I like going to the root of that. And really what it is in simplest terms is our ability to get stuff done. That's the simple definition of executive function. And if you think about the word executive and execute, an executive is like the CEO of a company. They're in charge of having a vision for the future of the company, organizing, their team, and being able to take action, executing to get to the goal. And so people who struggle with executive function, they struggle with the mental tools, the mental skills of managing their thoughts, their emotions, and their actions so that they can persist in their behavior toward a goal. And oftentimes the struggle is that an ADHD brain is an interest-based brain. So if you're a parent of a child who has executive dysfunction, you might notice that when they're really, really interested and into something, their executive functions seem to work great. They are able to focus and persevere through challenges and push themselves toward a goal until they complete it. But when it comes to something that's boring or challenging and not meaningful to them, then they could feel it, they might look like they're stuck in a paralysis or an avoidance.
That is a very good explanation. And I'm glad that you said it like that, because what I was surprised at is a lot of people, when I asked them before this, I asked, just a few parents at the, walk-up line at the school, what they thought the term meant. And many of them, surprisingly, actually thought that it had to do with very high level, because you're saying executive. They thought it was like very high level thinking, like more on the gifted side. I was surprised that so many actually, that means they didn't have a clue to what it was. So I'm glad you said it that way, because it's really very basic things that, people without any diversity or issues don't even think about. It's just, it's things that you need. So I'm glad the way you explained it. And I have learned that the development of executive function differs in individuals, which I did not know before. So even as far as people who grow up in homes with speaking two languages, I can't even understand that. Maybe you can explain a little bit how that differs, because to me, I mean, it's hard enough. Think about how hard it is for a kid to learn to speak in the first place, right? They're watching you, they're watching your mouth, they're listening, but now they're listening to two different things, and those little baby brains are getting it somehow. So can you explain how that kind of affects executive functioning?
That's a really interesting question that I haven't thought of before. And I think I could share maybe just my anecdotal experience as an immigrant growing up in two different cultures. So I'm from the Soviet Union, from Central Asia. And so that in that country, like there were many languages actually spoken around us. And I moved to the US as a 5-year-old. So I think what's interesting in what we're talking about in terms of the cultural influence on our development, there are so many differences. Like, for example, the traditions and the routines and the expectations in the home where I grew up, for example, for me as a girl, were that I had chores, I had structure, I had routines, I had lots of responsibilities around the home. And my mom trained me to do this through repetition, through a co-regulation, meaning I was doing it, learning from her doing it. We were doing it together. And there was a gradual release of responsibility. Whereas my brothers, who absolutely had different expectations, they didn't have the same responsibilities and chores at home. In fact, they were born a lot later, and we call them, the Americans. They were born more in an American culture, and they had a lot more freedom, and they spent more time outside the home, and they were not trained like I was from an early age to develop these skills. And that shows, in our lifestyles now as adults. It shows in our mindsets and the struggle they have sometimes, like keeping their space organized. But I think anytime you grow up with multiple languages, I think it does challenge your brain and helps to broaden your perspective, because part of what ADHD or executive dysfunction makes very difficult is the ability to take different perspectives and to think flexibly about ideas. So people with executive dysfunction tend to be rigid, tend to have very autopilot thinking, and a lot of distorted thinking. So all or nothing thinking. So I think there's lots of different positive and negative influences that come from family systems and traditions and beliefs, cultural beliefs. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much more about it, but that's what came to mind when you brought it up. And I want to say one more thing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but one thing you said about giftedness. It's true that many gifted kids are what we call twice exceptional. So they might have a disability that might be hidden by a giftedness, or the other way around, a giftedness that's hidden by a disability. And I just wanted to mention that our executive function development has zero correlation to our intelligence. You could have a very high IQ and be very dysfunctional in your executive function, and all the way around the spectrum. So there's no correlation, meaning sometimes the simplest of tasks, like making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, might feel so difficult for someone with a genius IQ who can do much more complex things.
Right.
And so they're not related.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes perfect sense. And you've answered like 3 questions. That was wonderful. Thank you. That was really good. Yes, because I have one down the line that I was thinking about asking you about different culture. Well, a little bit about culture, but also about boys and girls. If there's a different, I'll ask you that later because it's a little bit different. And if it's fine. But so yes, the whole issue with high level and low and excuse me, there were so many. A teacher has told me that she had children in her class that were labeled as ADHD. Actually, she had 3 children, not the same year, but 3 children within a few years, she said, that were labeled as ADHD, actually diagnosed ADHD, and to come to find out later that they actually were gifted and that they were being held back a little bit because they were given extra time to do things because of ADHD, when that just made their sort of gifted self like lazy and like, oh, I don't have to do it, then I guess I won't. Like, they were smart enough to catch on and logical, and yet it shouldn't happen. I feel like there's got to be, I don't know who diagnosed those kids, but there's got to be a better system than that. If you can make that kind of a mistake, it's important to a child, whether they are, even if there's not, some schools don't have an actual gifted class, even if there's not, they need to have, they need more things to keep their attention, to keep their motivation, right? I know one thing for sure, and I spoke about this before, that the teachers seem to agree with across the board. I don't have a lot, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say I don't have a lot of good to say about the school system in most areas, but the teachers I do support. It's not their fault. They're not allowed to do a lot of things. However, many of them have said that one of the biggest obstacles in the way of teaching the best they can is that they have to stop what they're doing too soon and move on to the next thing. And a lot of kids are not ready. Some because they're taking it all in and maybe a little bit slower, but a lot of them because they are interested and they want to know more about it and they're used to asking questions and digging deep. And now you've told them, okay, that's great, but now we have to stop, move on to this different subject. And that's not the way people really learn in real life. I don't know why the schools do it, but that's how they have to. I understand. So anyway, that's one of the big obstacles that I wish we could change or do something about. I don't think that's going to.
Can I offer a little bit of perspective on what you shared? Because there's a lot of nuance there in a lot of what you shared that's almost impossible to get to in a format like this. So just to reflect back, and I'm not big on labels. I'd like to, because the world is so much more complicated than the labels and the definitions we have. And I like the saying, all models are wrong and some models are helpful. So the way I'd like to reframe what you shared in terms of teachers and schools and giftedness and how we accommodate students. So I would have to agree with you. I think like teachers are some of the most hardworking, passionate people on the planet. They do a job that I could never do. It's like way too difficult. I have no idea how they juggle it. And they give so much of themselves. So big love for teachers, big empathy and respect. I disagree with most of what the school system is and how we do schooling and the roots of schooling. So I definitely agree that the classroom environment, the structure, the way we do standardized instruction, and the pace at which teachers are forced to move is really hard. So that being said, when a student is labeled or diagnosed with ADHD and they're gifted or not, what we're really looking at is a different neurotype. It has to do with their ability to regulate their attention, to keep track of and manage time and tasks and details, and monitor their behavior through time. And also, we're talking about kids who probably have big emotions, big dysregulation, and a difficulty in managing that. So when we're dealing with, and another thing we're dealing with is asynchronous development. So different parts of the brain developing at different speeds, delayed in different ways, depending on so many factors, depending on the environment, depending on, how the kid feels that day, how much protein is in their belly, how much water they're drinking, all these factors and the environment they're in. So whatever top of the surface behaviors that teachers are witnessing are rooted deeply in a neurobiological thing. So what we do when we label and give accommodations to kids oftentimes is we might be enabling certain behaviors that are actually not helping them develop their executive functions. Sometimes extensions are helpful, or deadline extensions, and sometimes they enable and accommodate the cycle of procrastination that these kids tend to be stuck in. So when I'm talking with educators or parents, I'm really framing the conversation in how do we create enough accountability in the moment for this child and enough ownership and awareness, and how do we scaffold their ability to meet the expectation and challenge without lowering the expectation. And oftentimes kids do better in a more structured environment that scaffolds their ability to stretch out of their comfort zone and push themselves to meet that. And that's where they get that internalized efficacy, and they get their self-esteem and confidence when they do hard things, when they push and persevere through the difficult things. So it's very difficult to figure out where the balance is, but on the whole, I like accommodations that place the responsibility and ownership back on the student and have the student initiate advocacy for themselves, ask for what they need, and differentiate their instruction enough so that they can access the lesson, whatever it is, in a way that uses their strengths. And that's almost an impossible ask for a teacher to do in a classroom with 30 students, of whom are, have IEPs.
Yeah. It is. I see that. And I do a lot with the elementary schools. I know you work with a little bit older children and teens, but in the elementary schools, they have a little bit smaller class size in most schools, not all, but it's a lot harder. The kids are not advocating for themselves. Even if they don't have enough confidence to really do that. And it's very hard for the teacher. They're very good. I've seen teachers, come up with wonderful things to make it work. Motions that these kids even in first grade, motions that the kids understand and pick up, and they do what they're supposed to do. And it's like magic that happens sometimes with a really good teacher. But it is really hard. And when the child is smart enough or old enough to start to take advantage of the fact that, they can get away with, I don't feel like doing my homework because I have extra time to do it. That's not what you want to teach them to do, and it's not going to help them in the future. So yeah, it makes it hard when the kids know that, this gives them extra anything. And I don't know if that's across the board, if that's good for anybody to know that,
Exactly.
Yeah. When they're older, you want them to be involved. I understand that, but in the beginning, when they're very little, maybe not.
And what we're really speaking to is that, this is a developmental process. So there are developmentally appropriate expectations of executive function as kids
Right.
grow. And so this process, and it's delayed. So a child who is, for example, 12 years old might have the executive age of a student who is 2 to 3 years younger than them. And
Mhm.
so what's developmentally appropriate in terms of expectations for them, in terms of their self-management and ability to regulate themselves, is different. And so we have to recognize that the behaviors we see as laziness or emotional
Mhm.
manipulation or
Yeah.
avoidance, all that stuff, it's a neurobiological function of their executive brain. And they need understanding and compassionate support, but they also need adults who keep high expectations and push them to learn these skills and to grow so that we're not kind of pathologizing,
Yeah.
that, oh, I have ADHD, so therefore that's an excuse why I can't, live up
Yeah.
to
I'm really
expectations.
glad you said that because a lot of the teachers seem to push, even if you're not qualified for an IED, they'll push for the 504. And because so many kids can qualify for that, and so you don't even need a diagnosis in some states for ADHD if the parent agrees and the counselor and the teacher. So that being said, the teachers will push for it with a very logical argument that it's easy to get it now because in middle school it'll be hard to get if he needs it. So that's logical. That sounds great to the parent. And I have to agree, if it's easier now and my kid's going to struggle later, I want to do something about it. But then at the same time, they're now, getting them a 504 or whatever that they may or may not need. And again, the child knows about it, makes it harder to for them not to well, not for all, but for some of them, makes it hard for them not to take I don't want to keep saying take advantage because I don't think they really are meaning to take advantage. I just think it's, you know, like you're saying, they could be super smart, maybe borderline gifted or what have you, or high achievers. And then if their executive function level is a couple years younger, well, that's gotta be confusing for them because
Exactly.
it right? Yeah, it's
And
confusing.
I hear stuff from kids like, I feel stupid. Why can't I just get this done? This is so
Mhm.
simple. There's a lot of shame
Yeah.
that comes along with this. And I think one of the fallacies of these types of conversations and the way we frame executive function is 90% of the time we're talking about school and academics, when executive function happens all day long from the
Right.
moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. So I think we do kids a disservice sometimes when we're so laser focused on them being productive students who are able to jump through all the hoops and learn all the subjects equally well, that we forget, first of all, that there's lots of boring everyday routines that they need. There's structure and time management that they need throughout the day. They need to be able to understand like how to regulate their emotions, or how to function in social situations, how to contribute to the family. A lot of kids, because school is such a big pain point for parents have astronomically high expectations for school, and they put all their energy, focus, attention, resources on getting the grades up, but they're not creating the environment at home that's going to help their brain develop with all these other life skills. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. And that's why, to me, academics is a vehicle for practicing executive function. And there's so much more we can do to broaden the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, there is. I would love it if there would be a way, and I've said this before too, if parents can be educated more so in what you're saying. I understand the tendency to want to, you just got maybe possibly just, had this diagnosis put upon you and now you're dealing with it and the parent probably has all kinds of emotions about it too. I understand all of that. But if they knew that by sort of over, over, I don't know, like, doing too much for their kids, and not allowing them to do what they normally would let them do. If they just were aware of that, I'm sure they'd want to do the best for their kids like everybody else. But I don't believe a lot of parents actually know that part of it. If they are with some really good therapist or doctor, maybe they're told. I don't know, but I haven't
think
come
the
across
root of that micromanaging behavior, that overfunctioning, is I understand, because first of all, when you have executive delays in development, we're talking about a very long game here. We're talking about, if I'm working with a 14-year-old, I'm getting them ready to be 35.
Yeah.
I'm, yes, there's lots of urgency and skills that they need to learn in the moment, and they need to get their crap together and organize their materials and figure that stuff out. But I'd much rather a kid like fail a year of school than them being enabled and micromanaged so that they fix all the immediate fires and problems, but not really develop those long-term skills. So I think the biggest perspective shift that helps parents is that you're playing the long game, that don't expect your kid to be able to wake up one day and just magically be able to regulate themselves. They need a lot of support and scaffolding, and it's okay that they go through their struggles. There is dignity in the struggle. There is a lot of good learning to be had in the struggle. And when we rob kids of their struggles, we're robbing them of all these opportunities to learn.
Yes. And I work with parents on parenting and some entrepreneurship. I don't specialize in ADHD or anything like that, but it is so prevalent. A lot of parents, are from, have that in their families. And, one thing that always seems to at least give them pause is, I tell them, because it's the truth, how many young adults do you know that are walking around and you're shaking your head because they're not, they don't know how to live, or they don't know how to even talk sometimes. You're like, how did they get through to be 25 even, or whatever? And I'm like, that's what you're trying to avoid, is, because a lot of the little parenting, I call them little, but I meant young kids, with young kids, the parents, a lot of the issues are with the fact that they have trouble allowing only the natural consequences, to happen, and they want to step in. And so to get them to realize that, I've used that before, and at least it gives them pause to think about it. I know we can continue talking about the same thing for a long time because it applies to so many people. But I did want to ask you, I know that you do a lot with mindfulness. That's the name of your site, right? But so do you think, I'm sure you do, let's put it a different way. Would you say that there's an actual link between executive function and mindfulness practices? Like, can there, and would you actually recommend a starting point for people who don't know where to go with that?
Yes, that's such a great question. And I'm not like a certified mindfulness practitioner or anything like that. I'm a layman who understands the depth and importance of mindfulness in my own life. And we were just having this conversation in a peer support group where there was somebody who was recently diagnosed as a young adult and trying so many different apps and tools and systems and checklists and co-working groups. And they were like throwing everything in the kitchen sink at the problem. And the one thing we weren't talking about that I addressed in that conversation was, this is about your brain. This is about neurobiology. We're not going to fix the brain with the system. Right. We need to target the core of the issue, which is our autopilot system. Right. It's wonky. So like if you were an airplane and you relied on your autopilot, I'd say like you'd be crashing in the sides of mountains. Because there's something with our navigation system that's off. So we need to put a lot of effort into training our brain, into developing what I call the inner coach voice, because we have a really loud inner critic, by the way. All of us do. But people with executive dysfunction have received so much more negative messages and experienced so many more consequences that we really need to do this internal work of creating a psychological space in our minds where we can access our intentional thinking. So there's automatic thinking where your mind wanders, and that's our default mode. And then there's goal-oriented thinking, which is our executive function mode. It's like, hey, there's something I want. It's rooted in my values. It's something I want for myself, and it's something I'm willing to work toward because achieving it is important to me. That's when we activate the executive brain. And so in order to even know ourselves enough and to know what we want, we have to be able to pause and be with ourselves and think things through rationally. And we can't access that rational brain if we don't practice, right? So much of our emotions, our thoughts, and our behaviors are on that autopilot. Like the more than 95% of what we think, feel, and do is just patterned into us by our culture, media, our parents, the environment that we grew up. So we have to be able to pause and be mindful. And the simplest definition of mindfulness I've found is the ability to feel your emotions without acting on them.
Okay, that's good. That's good. People can go with that, because there's a lot of people that are very afraid of words like mindfulness. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But yeah, more than I imagined, that kind of roll their eyes and feel like it's a way out there term, mindfulness, or I mean,
Yeah.
some people listen. Some people roll their eyes at yoga too. I mean, it's just like
I don't blame them either, because there's all these buzzwords and marketing, and there's all this stuff about positive thinking. And I get it. I get it. But ultimately, the research base in understanding here is, executive function ultimately at the highest level at when we're fully developed, when our brain is between 25 and 30 years old. What it does is it allows us to have metacognition. And metacognition is the ability to witness our thoughts and to witness our emotions and to witness our behavior without judging. And so awareness isn't just being able to notice something, but it's being able to notice something without judgment so that you can see reality as accurately as possible and determine what your next response is, rather than just impulsively reacting to stimuli, right? Because that's our animal brain, which is great. We need it. But our human brain is the last to develop. And we need to train ourselves to be able to access it. And the way we do that is through meditation, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. And there's so many ways of doing that. And I don't think we talk about spirituality enough, because we're spiritual beings. And we need to be able to find our fulfillment and our joy in a world that just throws struggle at us all the time. Like, I don't want to coach somebody just to check off all the items on their to-do list and be unhappy at the end of the day because they're beating themselves up or they're criticizing themselves because they don't see a deeper meaning and value in what they're doing, that they're just forcing themselves by burning through their fuel tank and being burnt out. And I heard a speaker once say, and I'll wrap my point up here, is that there's a difference between burning energy and burning spirit.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And I think that was Alan P. Brown who said it. I might be wrong, but there's a difference between burning energy and burning spirit. And what we want to do is teach kids how to be themselves, but jump through the hoops that they need to jump through so that they have the opportunities that the world offers them, so that they can hone their strengths, push themselves, train themselves to do difficult things so that they have the freedom. So the development of self-discipline and parenting your kid to have self-discipline is for the purpose for them to have freedom and fulfillment. And we have to frame it that way for them, because then they'll choose to struggle through and train their minds in order to unlock what they want for themselves.
And that's a very hard, I mean, it's hard for a lot of adults to do this, right? And that's why so many people are struggling and looking for other ways to be more mindful. And I do think more people are are coming to enjoy, to enjoy finding that. Not enough, not enough people, but yeah, I do think and it's hard. I think it's hard for a lot of adults who have never, approached that kind of system before, and now all of a sudden, and a lot of times they they don't get much support from the people closest to them, because it's something new that they're doing. So yeah, for kids, I'm sure it's just as hard. I mean, it's obviously it's hard, but at least they have not gone through, a lifetime of being one way and then trying to change. So I think it's
Exactly. Like
great
what
to try and
the
change it.
conversation, the conversation we're having is countercultural.
Yeah.
Going back to culture. This goes against, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps,
Right.
stop whining and just
Yes.
shut up and get it done. The just do it. That's
Mhm.
not how our brains function.
Right.
Right.
Yes, it's not at all. And before I forget, there was one thing while you were saying just earlier, um, you'll know what it is when I tell you. I wanted to remember when I have a grandson who is almost 10, and he has what they're calling mild case of ADHD, but he is borderline gifted, so to speak. Okay, knowing all that, the one thing that I have not struggle, but I just can't seem to understand is he loves to read. And when he's reading, or even we started a practice when he was young of reading like a chapter each. So sometimes we still do that because he has a younger brother and we do it all together. Anyway, I have asked him many times from the time he was little till now, if when I'm reading, does he visualize it in his head? He says no. He says he doesn't. I'm like, aren't you like seeing what I'm describing? Aren't you like seeing that? And he said, not really. And I just thought that everybody did that. And I thought actually it was easier for kids to do that. But in his case, he says he doesn't really do it much. So I don't know if that has anything to do with what we're talking about or not. It's just a point I was curious about.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, you don't look like you have a 10-year-old grandson. So,
Oh, you're my favorite now.
But that's really interesting. I think like so much of our brain operates on assumption, and we project our own experience to everyone around us, right? We're like, of course, you're just like me, but you're different.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of people who are on the like neurodivergent side of things
Mhm.
that I think it's called aphantasia, where your brain doesn't pull up images of the things that you're processing. Some people with, and I think I'm saying it right, some people with aphantasia are able to recall a specific image of a specific object or place that they have seen before. So if I say, imagine an apple, they're going to imagine a specific apple that's like sitting on a counter that they looked at, or a photo of it.
Mm-hmm.
I, who doesn't have aphantasia, I could just imagine like a completely random apple that my brain invents.
Right. Yeah.
And creates that image for me. So I'm a highly visual person. And I've spoken to people who, I do workshops where we use visualization. And I've learned from some of the attendees there who say, well, I can't do that. Can I write it down instead? Or can I draw a picture? And I'm like, oh, of course. So yeah, there's so many different variables and ways that our brain functions. So that is very fascinating. And I wonder how your grandson kind of does process the information. Maybe it's more of a somatic thing where he feels it in his body, or maybe he can relate it to an experience that he's had in the past. It could be that he's just verbally processing the words and feeling them, so that's fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, he's fascinating. That's for sure. Awesome. So listen, I have a lot more questions. I don't know how much time yet, but if you would like to do a few more questions, maybe we can get to, I like to do at the end, I forgot to mention this to you, but I like to do at the end kind of a rapid fire thing where it's like quick question and answer. Sometimes they don't always come out that way, but we can attempt. Let me see the most important thing. Okay. Well, we've talked a lot about the structure of what executive function is, and how it is perceived, and how it could be different in a lot of different people. So before we get any farther along, I wonder, is there any evidence based? Because, people like to go on Dr. Google and Google everything. And is there any like evidence-based techniques that maybe you use or tell parents to use that really helps executive function, in children who are struggling?
That is a great question. I want to think about one thing because it's easy to kind of machine gun lots of things, but one thing that parents can do to help their kids' executive function as it connects to micromanagement. And this is evidence-based from actually the field of speech pathology. And I learned this through Linda K. Murphy's book, Declarative Language. It's the Declarative Language Guidebook. It is a fantastic resource because you can read it in a couple hours and you could immediately start shifting the way you use language. And so here's what declarative language does for the brain. What we want for kids with executive dysfunction is for them to start practicing their own awareness in the moment and asking themselves the right questions so they can orient themselves. Okay, what am I doing? What was I going to do? What do I need to get done? What's my first step? Oh, I'm being distracted. Oh, I'm hungry. I need this. We want them to start having a conversation with themselves that helps them to manage and regulate themselves. How am I feeling? Oh, I need a drink of water. I need to take a walk. We want them to have this type of self-management. So what often parents do, because there's some urgent need for, homework needs to get done. We have to get out the door. You need to find your shoes. Like there's an endless number of things, right, that need to get done. So I tend to witness that parents get into a cycle of directing their kids, telling them what to do, telling them, like by what we call imperative language. And imperative language is either asking a question or giving instruction, and the question it demands an answer and the instruction demands action to be taken. So when we're telling kids, we're leaving in 5 minutes, you need to grab your shoes, your backpack, and your water bottle and meet me in the car. And then you walk out the door and you come in 10 minutes later and your kid's like, I don't know, drawing on a coloring book. Yeah. Or something. Like they're not doing the things. And that's because telling them what to do does not activate their executive brain, because for them to activate their executive brain, they have to want something for themselves and decide that this is what they need and be able to visualize it. They need to be able to visualize themselves walking out the door with their backpack, their water bottle, and their shoes. And then that image of themselves is going to help them to execute those things. Okay, so that's how our working memory works. So when a parent is imagining the kid walking out the door with those things, and they're using their executive function to organize the list of things and actions that need to happen within a certain amount of time, and the parent is feeling the urgency of being aware of all that and aware of the time and how much time they have, that's the parent using their executive brain and their executive function to just tell the kids exactly what they need to do. So they're the ones in the driver's seat, the kid's in the passenger seat. And what often happens is this pattern of the kid doesn't follow through because they can't, and or they're not fully present and paying attention. They don't have that sense of urgency. They don't have the image of what they need. And so the parent comes in, and what do? Parent grabs their shoes, gives them the shoes, says, put on your shoes right now. Parent says, where's your backpack? Oh, I left it here. Okay, never mind. Go meet me in the car. I'll go get your backpack and water bottle. Okay, you just have to go. I don't want to be late. Right. But that's where micromanaging comes in. So the imperative language we use when we're like, where's your backpack? Or go put your backpack on, that does not spark the executive brain. So the opposite of that, declarative language, is where parents can make a tiny little shift and start using visual language and start just wondering things out loud. Because as the adult, are aware of what the child needs, you want them to be aware. You want them to look around and say, look at a clock. And I love analog clocks for this reason. Look at a clock and, oh no, and see, I have mine little colored. Oh
Yes.
no, I have 5 minutes. Okay, so here's a great visual tool. I have 5 minutes and I could see the minute hand sweeping through and I'm going to have to leave right at the edge of that. So when a kids can monitor time and when you say, oh, I wonder what time it is, you're just wondering out loud. That's a declaration, not an instruction or a question.
Mhm.
When you make a declaration around your kid, not directly even to them, you'll notice that maybe, and you pause, this is really important. You'll notice that at first, they're just going to keep doing whatever it is they were doing. And then they might go, huh, what time is it? Because you've activated that part of their brain to become aware that there's this thing called time. And if you have a visual tool, then that you could practice giving them the responsibility of managing time and figuring out what they need. And you can have a photograph of all the things. Does it look like when I'm out the door? Well, I have a photograph with me in my backpack, my shoes, and my water bottle. And they have these types of visual tools in their environment, and it's their responsibility. Now they're feeling urgency. Oh, I have 5 more minutes. Oh, what do I need? Oh, I need my shoes. I need my backpack and water bottle. Oh my God, the self-esteem that comes from their executive decision-making in that moment and the fact that they figured it out and they took action and they got out the door on time, like that's what we want. That's the process we want to foster. And so using declarative language sounds like, oh, I notice you're sitting on something. Like sometimes kids don't have body awareness. And if you're like doing a board game, they might be sitting on half the board. Well, I notice I can't see the corner of the board game. And they're like, oh, I'm sitting on it. And then they can choose to move. So that's one way of doing it. Another thing is, I wonder how long it might take you to finish your homework because we have dinner plans at 6 o'clock. And then pause. And maybe your kid's going to say something that's completely magical thinking. Oh, it's cool. I only have this math worksheet. It'll take me 5 minutes. Meanwhile, you have an email from the teacher who's listed 12 missing assignments and your kid's getting a D. And you're sitting here thinking, you have 12 missing assignments. But if you're going to micromanage them and freak out and say, no, we're going to cancel all the plans. I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to help you organize your list. And I'm going to make sure you're going to, okay, start this one now. Start this one now. Here, I'll do this for you. All of that kind of impulsive fixing the problem in the moment versus, I wonder if you've seen that email from your teacher.
Just that's it. Yeah.
That's it, and take a pause. And because you're playing the long game and it has to be okay that there's 12 missing assignments. Like,
right.
It's actually okay. And your kid's going to be okay. And where they are now in their developmental journey is not where they're going to be in a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. And you have to trust that. And I like to use the analogy of a garden, and I'll kind of wrap up my point here. But if you're growing a tomato in a garden and you're freaking out because, a couple weeks into it, the tomato is green and firm and small, and you're like, oh no, how is this ever going to be ripe? And you're overwatering it and you're giving it too much sun or whatever, you're overfunctioning. Like you're not trusting the process that nature already gave us everything we need to grow into a beautiful red, ripe tomato. And that we're here to create a nurturing environment that's going to facilitate that to happen. That, you're not in charge of teaching and lecturing your kid and managing them and making sure they're successful. You are there to model behavior, to create structure, to make limits, and to allow them to experience natural consequences. Don't let them get run over by a car because that's dangerous, So as long as they're physically safe and away from harm and danger, giving them safe experiences of failure is one of the best things we can do for them.
That was very well said. And I will give a compliment to, I want to reiterate how I do support teachers 100%, like you said. And there, to that point, I know of quite a few teachers who use that kind of language in their classroom all the time, and they are good at it. I mean, it's just, it's second nature to them. They're not having to struggle and come up with stuff. They know what to do, along with the motioning and the kids picking that up, but they are very good at that. And the kids respond to that. And maybe that's part of the magic that happens in a good classroom, right?
Exactly.
And that's why the kids are able to, in those classrooms, actually be more responsible and do all the things. And the parents are like, what do you mean? He doesn't do that at home. How does he even do that? So that is a great example. And yeah, I'm going to recommend, what is that book that you mentioned?
Linda K. Murphy has
Linda
two
K. Murphy.
fantastic guidebooks. One is the Declarative Language Handbook, and the second is the Co-Regulation Handbook. And co-regulation is another way of saying modeling. So assigning roles of competency is the summary. So you as a parent have certain skill set that you'd like to teach your kid, give them a small part of responsibility in that, something they're capable of doing well enough with your support or on their own, and gradually give them more and more responsibility and challenge them to develop these skills.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely recommend those books because I think that would be great reading for anybody, especially parents. Okay, maybe let's see. We have time for a few rapid questions, maybe? Rapid fire questions? Okay. First one should be easy. I'm going to guess. What do you think about the role of physical exercise? We all know how important it is. And I know that I have, in the past, I've told my grandson and I've told other kids too in the classroom, whatever, if they're like really wound up about something, I will just, if there's a space of whether it's in the house or in the yard, wherever we are, there's a space, I will say, not like a gym teacher, but I will say, go run around. You have 2 minutes. Go run around. I'll tell you when the time's up. And then they come back and they're good. Sometimes they just know that.
I'm so glad you brought it up. There's research that shows that 15 minutes of physical exercise works just as well as taking an ADHD medicine for the function of the prefrontal cortex, which is where executive function happens. Sometimes, and I work with a lot of teenage boys, so very often they're showing up to my session, they're scattered, and I'm like, dude, you got to do something. What are you going to do? 20 push-ups, 50 push-ups, sit-ups, and I'll literally get on the floor and we'll do it like together and get some oxygenation in the blood and in the brain. And after that, they just feel better and they function better. So for me personally, walking is a must. Every single day I have to go on a long walk or on a run or to the park. I need to put my feet in the ground. Like, our bodies are meant to move and we don't do that enough. And when we're asking, especially young boys, to sit in a classroom, sit still all day and just focus, like that's not how we were wired to live in this world. Yeah. So we have to make movement and exercise important. It is one of the 4 basic pillars of executive function. There's routines, there's nutrition, there's sleep, and there's movement. Those are the most important.
And those are the most important for everything, as a matter of fact.
Exactly. Like the Maslow's triangle, right? Yeah. Need that we all have, but especially if you want to take care of your brain, you got to get those systems down.
You do. I think I mixed up a question. This doesn't look to me like a rapid fire question, but if you can, what do you I know you deal with older kids, but and I know there's going to be different ways to deal with kids of different ages, preschoolers to teenagers, and whatever in between. Is there any way that I don't know, that something that might suit everybody across the board, that's easy for parents to remember
in terms of just their role as a parent?
Yeah, just something easy that whether their kid is a toddler or whatever, it's something that works for almost everybody. I know that's not usual, but there's probably
the thing that came to mind immediately that I wrote down and I think answers this question for all ages is you don't want to be your kid's boss. You want to be their leader. And
that's good.
Maybe take some time to digest that and figure out what that means too. But how could you be their leader and not their boss?
Oh, that's definitely something that I can relate to because that I actually teach parenting with leadership is actually a little guidebook that I wrote. So yeah, I can definitely incorporate that with my coaching. But parents think of leadership as the boss. They definitely do. Yeah.
Sometimes with younger kids, you have to be like more of their manager. So Dr. Russ Green talks about, as kids grow up and they reach the age of 12 and they get into more adolescence, there's a transition that happens. You're not their manager anymore. Now as a growing teenager, you become their collaborative consultant.
Mhm.
Now, it doesn't mean you give up all your parental authority and your kids are like at your same
Right.
level, because there's always that the hierarchy of authority is with the parents, and
Mhm.
kids need to be given age appropriate, you know, power, responsibility, and trust within that
Yeah.
system. But as a parent, you're the leader,
Right.
and that job never ends.
You have to, yeah, that's how it has to be. Okay, an important topic is screen time.
Yes.
Ah, everybody, yes, everybody wants to do something about screen time, but I'm wondering the opposite. And I wish there was less screen time, believe me. However, in the case of, executive function, ADHD, or anything else, might there be strategies for leveraging the technology to support the executive function development instead of the other way?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I often get asked this question because I work with a range of individuals, different ages, and adults who also, need systems for organizing themselves. And every single system is highly personalized to the individual. So when I'm working with, for example, a high schooler who's lost their planner for the 12th time, it doesn't matter how good that planning system is because they can't find it. So we're going to leverage first of all, they're digital natives, right? Like I'm not a digital native. The internet wasn't around when I was
Right.
growing up. And then it later, happened. And then social media happened and all that. So I'm mortified at some of the stuff happening online. And I personally don't participate in it. But there's some real positives, Google Calendar, the task list, all the apps on the phone. There's many different things that kids can leverage and that they could feel like they can become experts in because it's digital based. So
Yeah.
I think they're amazing tools out there. And like even Chat GPT, that can be an amazing tool. Can kids use it to write all their essays? Sure. But, our technology is an extension of our brain. And anytime we can externalize the stuff that our brain's not good at out to something else that does it
Right.
better for us, that's a win.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think they love to feel like experts and they already know more than we do about technology. They could usually fix my phone, so
And they can get around all the parental blocks and all that stuff.
yeah.
So you don't want to only rely on
Right.
um, forcing your kids off. You want to really talk about values and
Mhm.
really ingrain into them what are the values and what's the importance of disciplining yourself when it comes to technology, and how to strike a balance, because that's really hard. Like personally, that's really challenging for me as an adult who does this for a living. And I can't imagine how impossible it feels for like a 12-year-old to manage their tech use.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is. Okay. One last question. I promise we'll move on. So there's definitely a bigger awareness today of executive function as a critical skill. We know that we just didn't know all the details, or maybe we were a little off on how to do things, but it is out there. So what can you share maybe some insights of educational approaches or even curriculum enhancements, anything that could be effective in promoting these skills in the schools?
Okay, that is a good question.
And you may not know of anything like that because it's we don't get privy to a lot of that stuff if you're not working in the schools, right? But there might be some things, some technology out there that you know of, or I shouldn't say something.
I would say the biggest thing that resonates, because as I do coach a lot of students, and one of the things that makes their lives more difficult is something that teachers do have agency over most of the time, which is the way they organize their class online. Most teachers have a website or a portal that kids can log into. And a lot of times for kids with executive dysfunction, it's really hard for them to figure out what is the concrete, clear expectation. Like, what is the homework? When is it due? How much time do I have to do it? Um, and it's hard for them to organize all this stuff. They feel really scattered. They're dealing with multiple teachers, with multiple styles of organizing information. So, one thing a teacher can do is leverage technology or their website to make things as simple as humanly possible for the kids to access. Um, and To me, the most important accommodation a teacher can give to a student who's struggling is the relationship that they have, is creating a safe relationship and problem solving with the kid, like inviting the child to come and problem solve with them and to take ownership of solving that problem and figuring out what are the barriers to success. And I just wanted to, like, so I guess I'm focusing on this because one of the biggest barriers is just figuring out what's expected and
Right.
spending all the cognitive energy that it takes to just log into 20 different sites and organize material and figure that out. Because by the time a kid does that, they're wiped and they don't have enough time, energy, resources to do the actual
Right.
work.
Yeah. It sounds like where parents would do well to give more leeway and more, letting the child be do the things that they're supposed to do. But in a teacher's case, it may be better to actually be more clear in what they need and when, because I know, for instance, if they normally have a reading log and they need to read 30 minutes a day or whatever, and if the teacher says you need to do this, it usually gets done. Whereas the teacher says, here's your reading log, you should do this, but
It's optional.
they don't. Yeah. So yeah, that's not the way, that's not the way it works. And that I've seen that, that it was beneficial. So yeah, that makes sense that teachers need
And
to.
again, like the more clarity and transparency there is in what's expected, and if the parents and the kid and the teacher can be on the same page and say, look, it's very simple, here are the assignments for the week, here's when they're due, and here's what's expected. Now there's transparency, now there's accountability, and now the kid can just, more easily organize and plan for themselves.
Yeah.
So that's just a big pain point I notice. And as a
Yeah.
coach, that's a big pain point for me because I spend hours a week culling through websites and organizing like due dates and things so I can keep track. And
Yeah.
if that's hard for me, it's super hard for, a teenager.
Yeah. Organizing is a big deal. And when you're dealing with so many different subjects at the same time, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot for I think, just what do we call
The neurotypical kids.
neurotypical. Thank you. Yeah. It's a lot for everybody. Okay. So is there anything that you would like to leave our audience with, something that you want them to remember above all or whatever? And then I'm going to put up your slide so they could see where to find you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I am not a parent. Okay, I've worked with thousands of families. I come from a big family, but I am not a parent, and I'm saying that to emphasize that the job of raising a human being is the most difficult on the planet, and a lot of parents carry a burden of shame and guilt. I wish I had known this sooner. I wish we had figured this out. I wish we had gotten them support. I wish we could have avoided or prevented this. And they blame themselves for a lot of the behaviors of the kid when it's not your fault. This is neurobiological. This is complex stuff, and the solution is complicated. So that carrying around that guilt is not serving you. It's not serving your kid. My hope is that you can step into acceptance for yourself, compassion for yourself, and do the things that are the most important to you, which is self-care, finding time for yourself, prioritizing your needs, and prioritizing your relationship with your child, and having compassion, and leaning into your authority in a way that feels like loving and connected, and you already have that wisdom and the skill set. You already have everything you need, and accessing it. That's the tricky part, where you as an adult need to be regulated, need to do the work of managing your own thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, so that you can start modeling and really just leaning into more accountability structure through collaboration, rather than trying to force your kid to do something and kind of feel that relationship breaking apart. So leaning into love and structure is how I like to talk about it, because it just feels just more authentic in the way that you want to show up in your family.
It does. It does. I often try to tell people, think of how it was way back when your child, before they started school. And I'm not saying it was easy. It's a toddler, right? But it was not pressure. There was no pressure. There was not that kind of stress. Maybe they were a wild kid. Even so, it was not the same kind of pressure where you have to do this, you have to do this. It doesn't matter. It was not timed like that. And it was so much more natural. And, it's very hard for a parent to say it's just school or it's just homework. It's hard for them because they want the best for their kids. And I understand that. But it's better when you realize it's better for them in the long run. Like you said, think of it long term, not just now. It's not going to be, and you can talk. Parents can have a nice, very good communication with the teachers. In most cases, teachers are going to be willing to even without a specific diagnosis or any kind of IEP in place or anything else, they're willing to work with you if you talk to them nicely and you're both on the same side. You don't have to butt heads. You're on the same side. You want the same thing. So I agree. I think that was wonderful advice. Thank you so much. And you can find Yulia on your website, mindfuleducation.com, right?
Yes.
And that's mindful with 2 L's. So it's mindful with 2 L's. That's a big deal. And you also have YouTube and you still have a blog, right?
Yes. I don't kind of publish stuff like I used to on a regular basis, but when an idea has me, I will I'll send something out. And by the way, through CHAD, the nonprofit organization, there are free weekly peer support group meetings for adults. I also run a group for young women. So anybody who wants to email me and get access to that service, it is 100% free online. You can access it from anywhere in the world. So that's a resource I'm happy to share.
That is great. And you work with adults also?
Yes.
Oh, okay. For some reason, did I say just teens before? I don't know.
Well, my primary program is focused on families with teenagers, but I also I love working with adults and people in college as well.
Yeah, good. That is great. Thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you how informative today was. I mean, it was wonderful. And thank you for everything.
I really appreciated how much research you did and all the questions you came up with for today.
You are very welcome. I learned a lot and I was happy to do it. So thank you. Thank you. That's it, folks. Thanks for joining us on Family, Business, and Beyond. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and make a bigger impact. Remember to follow us on social media for more tips, insights, and behind-the-scenes content. And don't forget to check out our online courses and webinars to continue your journey of empowerment and growth. Stay inspired, cast aside the doubt, let your dreams shout. Until next time, keep embracing the joy within and pursuing your passions. This is Deborah Kane, signing off. That's it, folks. Thanks for joining us on Family, Business, and Beyond. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and make a bigger impact. Remember to follow us on social media for more tips, insights, and behind-the-scenes content. And don't forget to check out our online courses and webinars to continue your journey of empowerment and growth. Stay inspired, cast aside the doubt, let your dreams shout. Until next time, keep embracing the joy within and pursuing your passions. This is Deborah Kane, signing off.